I'm going to get started then. So thank you again for joining us this evening for a virtual panel discussion related to our current exhibition, Fertile Ground. This exhibition is organized on the occasion of the retirement of Professor of Art Elaine Lorenz, and it showcases her work, which you can see behind me in this virtual screenshot, alongside her former students, several of whom are with us today. This exhibition is a testament to the instruction and creativity that blossoms at the art department at William Paterson University. So again, my name is Kristen Evangelista. I'm the director of the gallery at the William Paterson University Galleries. And today we are going to be having a panel discussion with the artists Leslie Adler, David Distillio, Deborah Guzman-Meyer, and Jason Schneider. First, I'd like to outline the format of our event. I'm going to briefly introduce our four panelists. Each artist will make a brief 5-minute presentation about their work and their practice. And then we are going to engage in a discussion with the panelists about not just their work, but also their careers and what they've been up to since being students at William Paterson. The audience will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. I think you can also use the question and answer if you like, but we ask that during the talk that you remain muted. And this program is going to be recorded and it will be available on the gallery's website in the near future. So I'd like to thank all of those who made this event possible. I'm especially grateful to the exhibiting artists for taking the time to share their work with us, for participating in this conversation and in the exhibition. We're delighted to have the opportunity to become more familiar with their artistic practices. I appreciate the valuable assistance of the gallery staff, including gallery manager Emily Johnson, who's on the event with us today, providing help behind the scenes, our collections manager, Casey Mathern, and our graduate assistant, Taylor Cassisi, who helped put together the PowerPoint presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Leslie Adler. Oh, I should be sharing my screen now. Hold on a second. Leslie Adler earned a BS degree in advertising design from the University of Maryland. After working as an art director and graphic designer, she returned to school to earn a Master's of Fine Art at William Paterson University and pursue a career in the arts. She can be found in her current studio in Maywood, New Jersey. She's a part of the 356 Art Gang in East Orange and a member of the First Street Gallery in New York City. She has taught at the college level, run art camps, and curated local exhibitions. Next, I'd like to introduce David Distillio, who graduated from Moravian College with a BA concentration in painting and later received an MFA from William Paterson with a concentration in sculpture. In between his bachelor's and MFA degrees, he lived and worked in New York City. He currently lives in Rockland County with his wife and his 2 children. In addition to his artistic practice, he teaches university classes in 3D design, sculpture, digital media, ceramic sculpture, wood sculpture, and drawing. Next, I'd like to introduce Deborah Guzman-Meyer, who's a Montclair-based artist by way of Chicago, New York City, and the Dominican Republic. She earned her BA at Pace University and her MFA at Columbia College in Chicago. Her work has been featured in exhibitions and collected throughout the country, including in Miami, Chicago, New York, and France. She currently is teaching art in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and she previously worked as an arts educator for the Montclair Art Museum, as well as the William Paterson University Galleries. Sorry, I forgot to advance this slide. This is her work in our current exhibition. Last but not least is Jason Schneider, who received a BFA in furniture design from William Paterson and an MFA in furniture design from San Diego State University. Over the past 2 decades, his work has been widely exhibited in California, Colorado, New York, and Pennsylvania. He's the former studio coordinator of the Furniture Design and Woodworking program at Anderson Ranch Arts Center in Snowmass Village, Colorado. Currently, he's an assistant professor at Northern Michigan University, where he also teaches woodworking and furniture design. So those are brief bios, but I encourage you to visit each artist's website to get more extensive information about their exhibition histories. Oops, I don't want to go there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first artist who's going to speak briefly about her work, and that is Leslie Adler. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And you can take over, Leslie. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I hope everyone can see this. Thank you, Kristen, for the introduction and for everything you did to get this together, and Emily and everybody else. I really appreciate being here, and thank you all for coming and looking at our work and listening to us. Really appreciate it. I am a member of Manufacturers Village Warehouse Artists in East Orange, New Jersey. Oops. And I'm a member of First Street Gallery in New York City, in Chelsea. And those are my two places where I keep my art career going, basically. I've been in a lot of shows in this country, one show in Paris, and I go through spells where I'm in a lot of shows, and sometimes I'm not a lot of shows when I'm working, but I think that's pretty common. So what I just want to briefly talk about is that everyone kind of arrives at their MFA or their program kind of differently. I came through a graphic design career, which is a very idea-oriented practice, which is interesting because I don't consider myself an idea-oriented fine artist. I'm actually quite the opposite. So it's kind of interesting. But the question for me was always, how do I express what I feel conceptually and organically through art? So the way I do that is by tapping into a higher power. And I do that by working from a place of non-judgment and intuition. I also try and put myself in my studio or any other possible workspace as often as possible. Could be outside. I like to work in a lot of different places. I am very experimental with everything I do, so I never really know what I'm going to do. So my comfort zone is working intuitively, which makes sense with everything I just said. That's really my comfort zone. So the first piece in this show is Assimilation, which is 22 by 30. It's India ink on 140-pound cold press Arches watercolor paper. My inspiration for actually all the pieces in Fertile Ground include nature and the 5 elements that make up matter. So each of us, everything in the universe is made up of the 5 elements: fire, water, air, wind, and earth. And we're no different. We don't pay attention to that very much, but we are no different. That's where we come from. So nature being everywhere is our way of experiencing how these elements play out. And we get to witness the intelligence of nature. And I just think, I'm really in tune with that. So Assimilation, this piece on the right, attempts to show the mind, body, and soul as organic, layered, interwoven elements. The next piece in this show is called Breakdown 1. It's 22 by 30 as well. It's also India ink and bronze fabric dye. There actually could be some coffee in this piece. I like to put organic material in my piece, This is also on 140-pound Arches cold pressed paper. It's actually part of a triptych, so there's breakdown 2 and 3 as well. And all these pieces, I kind of let the medium flow. So I will guide the medium with water, but once it's in the space I create, I let it kind of do its thing. I'll add things to texturize it or to model it, but basically I let the medium work itself in a little bit. And then I add a lot of sort of very small hand drawing paired with the ink, and I do this to show the structure behind the organicness of the ink. So it's kind of, I like that contrast, and I like to show what's underneath and what holds these pieces together. I'm saying here that in these paintings, there's a sense of unspecified metamorphosis. What I mean by that actually is like, it's the unspecified is our lack of awareness or understanding about these processes in nature that we really don't pay attention to enough attention to. So the third piece of the show is Wood One, which is my ceramic in the show, and it represents transformation and mass. In ceramics, the sensory information of the clay completely transforms through heat. The design of this was, again, very spontaneous, like most of my work, and inspired literally by a piece of very plain wood and my love of trees. I have many different bodies of work that are inspired by trees. Some are wood carvings, some are paintings, some ceramic. This was fired in a raku kiln and then barrel smoked. The outcome is as random and unique as the object it represents. So Elaine and I did this together. I asked her to help me with it, and it was, again, very experimental. You could try this 20 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. You'll never get the same result, because even if you put it in the kiln and you have it in there for a specific time, and then you smoke it for a specific time with a specific amount of paper, it still will never be exact. So it's really fun to do. When we did it, I did several pieces and they all look extremely different. So I really hope you enjoy these pieces, and I can be reached. Any additional questions that you don't get answers to tonight, I could be reached at contact Leslie at leslieadlerfineart.com. And that's my website as well, Leslie Adler Fine Art. And I'm also on the Manufacturer's Warehouse or Manufacturer's Village Artists website too. There's a lot of wonderful artists there as well. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for your presentation. So next, we're going to go and hear David Distillio speak about his work. So David, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. And if anyone has questions for Leslie, we can answer them at the end of the presentations.
Hello, I'm David Distillio. Thank you, Kristen, for putting together the show and this event. So my works in the show are called MMM and Sundisk, and kind of the theme I'm thinking of is speculative history and ritual objects. So the work selected for inclusion in the show both utilize similar processes and originate from an earlier concept. A series of performances beginning in 2013, but most directly manual mastery malfunction in 2015. They featured 3D scans of my hands turned into axe heads and 3D printed and cast in clay. I did these with these early works with Elaine. These axes then were attempted to be used to cut down a tree, but they fail. As I developed each of these works, the concepts became more refined and complex. To arrive at the works in this show, there are many iterations, materials, and processes explored. The works begin with 3D scans, and each subsequent work starts from that same 3D scan. Meaning the 3D scan happened once, and then the modeling changes via computer program. The form is altered and reprinted multiple times until I arrived at the form in the current show. So we can see a first test of the hand shovel, how it changed, different presentations of the work changing over time. So 3D modeling is building your object in a digital 3D space, and the rendering is creating a 2D image of this based on this 3D space, using simulations of materials and light. And the 3D printing is a machine process that physically builds up layers of plastic. I've also done it with clay, but I don't have any of those works in this show, into a physical object that originates from a digital model. So 3D printing is essential to my process. It's kind of where everything begins. And so we can see here 3D prints, renderings, the computer and the digital aspect leading the way for exploration of earth materials as well. Later, the earth materials like wood and metal are introduced in the process. Robotic CNC, computer numerical control, is where a digital object is created in the physical world by removing material from a block. In this case, the handle of MMM is poplar wood block. So here is the final form of the piece. That's CNC milled poplar wood and cast bronze from a 3D printed model that we saw in an earlier slide. Some influences I was looking at during this period are include Robert Gober, Willem Delvoye, Tom Sachs, and Tim Hawkinson. Each artist is exploring transformations of bodies and objects presenting familiar objects in a strange way. So then now I'm starting to talk about Sundisk, and the painting depicts the use of a golden scythe to collect mistletoe for a winter solstice ritual. And this painting is made during the industrial age, is a fantasy of what past life and culture would have been. And so that's kind of the form of that golden scythe and this idea of imagining past cultures. So I was thinking about an iron adze from the 9th to 10th century. And then the process for this work. The sculpture begins with a 3D scan of my hand, which is then 3D modeled and altered into this tool. The 3D printed sculpture is then set in a sand mold, and the print is burned out in a kiln. While this is happening, a furnace is used to melt iron, and then we pour the iron into the empty sand mold. Once the iron cools down, the piece comes out of the mold, and then the process of carving, all the spruing and venting material to get the finished form. Like the painting that inspired it, this is a piece that grabs parts of history that it likes and creates its own version of this culture. That's my, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for walking us through the inspiration and process behind your work. That was really fascinating. Okay, next I would like to introduce Deborah Guzman-Meyer. Deborah, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen with us next.
Yes, yes, thank you. First, I'd like to say thank you to William Paterson University Galleries for inviting me to be part of this panel. Kristen and Emily, who I have worked with before and have been pretty amazing. And I'm very fortunate to have met Professor Elaine Lawrence during the time that it was a very short time that I decided to take a hand building class. So it was transformative for me, actually, and probably the reason why I'm here. So my two pieces that I have in the show belong to a body of work which I have just recently started called Stone Mutasis, and is a Latin word meaning to transformation, the process of transformation in organic form into stone, into a ceramic piece. I view the work as being a puzzle that I have to sort of solve. The first piece I have in the show is called Colarium. And the inspiration for this came from what it sounds like, actually, coral reef. I had a vision in mind of what I wanted to look like. And I started putting panels together and working the clay with my hands and carving it. And this is what resulted. And oops. Here's a detail of the inside. This is all stoneware. Clay.
Deborah, can you please advance your slide? I'm sorry, we're only seeing the first slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Did you see any of the slides? Huh. Oh, sharing is paused. I'm sorry. Do you see it now?
No, you'll have to restart the share.
Okay. I'm sorry. It said to bring my screen to the foreground. Start to reshare. Okay, can you see it? Oh, it keeps saying the sharing is paused. I'm sorry.
You'll probably have to leave your Keynote window open and just step through the slides in your viewer without the actual presentation running.
I see. This is fun, right? And we're all having fun. Okay, here we go. So I will just share it this way.
There you go.
So the body of work, Stone Mutasis. Here is Colarium, which is the first one, which is inspired by coral reef. And I just had the idea, work on it with my hands. It's stoneware. And then my other piece in the show is the Pieris rapier, which is Latin for egg. It's a butterfly egg. So one of the things that inspired me is looking at microscopic images. And this is what microscopic images of cabbage white butterfly eggs look like. I have a photographic background, as Kristen said to everyone. I actually got an MFA in photography first, but I always had been kind of preoccupied in trying to bring a photograph to a three-dimensional place. So I started looking at microscopic images of different animals and decided that clay would be a good way to bring these to life. So this is what the piece in the show looks like. And this is when it was being built. And one of the things I want to do, just like the way that these eggs are massive, like they have so many different parts. You might see a dot, but it contains like hundreds of them. That is where I'm planning to go with this body of work. So I have made a new one. I'm going to continue adding new ones, and eventually my goal would be to show them all the way that they would be clustered around an organic form, the way that butterflies lay them on leaves. The part of this also work is looking at the coral reef and sea urchins and organic forms and how they go through a process of metamorphosis, like the egg, the butterfly egg, and how the cycle also in the ocean goes through many different phases. So I'm looking at that also and making some hand-built sea urchin-like pieces. This is raku clay. It was fired in a outside in a trash can, basically. And I'm adding those small pieces as I go along to be not only one piece, but to be part of like this ensemble. And one would be the microscopic world of the butterfly, and then we'll extend into also another unseen part of our world, which is under the water in the deep ocean. So this is like where I'm working from for my work. And that's it. This is my work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for showing us your works in progress, and also how you also, like Leslie, have explored raku, which is a fascinating technique. So our final presentation is going to be from David Schneider. So David, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
Oh, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to Kristen and Emily and William Paterson Galleries for having me. And of course, Elaine Lorenz for being our amazing professor and mentor over the years. So let's see, how can I advance? This is, the piece on the left here is in the show. It's one of two pieces that I have currently there. And it's a new body of work that I just started exploring. I've worked with corrugated cardboard for the past about 15 years now, ever since I stumbled across a pile of cardboard that I had to throw away. I was living in Colorado, and the cardboard was gorgeous, and so I started to glue it up and see what I can do with it, and it's been surprising me ever since. And so this series, I'm exploring color finally on the corrugated cardboard, carving with a grinder. Most of my work comes from the wood turning lathe. So you'll see a lot of round objects. And this disc here, the white disc, is also in the show. And it has plaster in it. And I really attribute that to Elaine Lorenz encouraging us to explore materials. You know, my interest in cardboard has to do with that as well, but furthering that by trying plaster, pushing it into the corrugations after I build the form and cutting it back, sanding it back to reveal the texture and the lines in the work. When I was at William Paterson as an undergraduate student, I was in the furniture design program, and these are some of the works that I made. You know, this is when I learned how to weld metal. That's some of the chair on the left and a cabinet on the right. This was my thesis presentation, sort of 7.5 foot tall solid wood chairs. It's very tall, and you know, in the galleries there at William Paterson. But further on in graduate school, probably about halfway through my three-year graduate program, my work started to mature. And this is one of the pieces where it really started to mature. And you could probably see the cement spheres on the bottom of these chairs. That is a direct influence from Elaine. Just incorporating these materials that I was also familiar with through my construction experience. So this piece has cement spheres as the base, mahogany seat, and a welded steel back. After graduate school, that's when I really discovered cardboard, when I moved to the Colorado to work at the Anderson Ranch Arts Center. And as a wood turner, thanks to Joe Van Putten, I was able to learn turning and then incorporate cardboard into my turning. And I'm one of the only people around that really turns cardboard on a wood turning lathe. So here are some of the turned forms that I make. And once again, going back to the material exploration, I have the cardboard, the plaster, and then I fill in the corrugations with cement as well. And I've also tried beeswax. So here's a bowl where I push the plaster through to the outside and have it ooze out on the inside, giving the interior surface a different texture. In these pieces, I'm exploring how the moisture can really manipulate the cardboard and change its form. Here's another form, that's the front side, and then the back side. This is a hollow form. This piece was shown at SOFA Chicago and next to one of my mentors in wood turning, David Ellsworth, and it was just a really exciting experience for me. And it also sold, which was also very exciting for me. A turned piece cut in half and turned into more of a rocking sculpture. Some lamps that I was exploring with cardboard. And, you know, I do have a background in furniture, so function is a big part of what my focus is on, but also while I'm exploring cardboard as a corrugated cardboard as a material, I don't dismiss any non-functional objects. So I'll explore anything that the material is telling me to, you know, look into. Here are some tables and some patterns in the corrugations. As you look through the tabletop on the left-hand side, that's what you'll see up top. And then as a wood turner too, I do a lot of segmenting, which means gluing different orientations of cardboard together in different orientations. And so here are some examples of that. This is a vessel. Cardboard is a material that you can see through if oriented correctly. So here's another sculpture where you can see through it in different facets. Some of the new work, some of the patterns that I'm trying out, some of the color. Playing again with plaster, tinting it with acrylic paints and cutting it back, revealing colors underneath. And then finally, you know, not holding back and trying every process that's available to me. This is cardboard that's run through a printing press in the printmaking studio to create the corrugated texture on the paper and then a blue stencil over it. And that's what I have to share for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. It was really neat to see the range of what you've accomplished with cardboard. So thank you for that. Now that everyone's introduced us a little bit to your practice and we've become familiar with the works that are in the exhibition, I wanted to have a conversation with you all. The first topic I wanted to explore, because we spent so much time learning about each of your distinct processes and your experimentation with process and material. I'd be curious to know if you could each tell us which comes first for you. Does the idea or the inspiration come first, or the process? So if someone would like to go first and share their thoughts about that, that would be wonderful. Do you want to go ahead, Leslie? I think you're muted.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Sure. Can you just repeat that? It was idea or process oriented?
Yeah, so you spoke to us about meditation, but for you, is that what drives the work, or does the materiality come first?
Well, I'm extremely process oriented. Yeah, because as I said, my work is sort of it's very intuitive and reactive. So that's how I work. So my ideas are never like strictly directly connected to the outcome. Does that make sense? So my work is not what you call prescriptive. It's more like winging, winging it. Um, it's spontaneous, and and sometimes this actually causes me some frustration, to be honest, because I'd like a little bit more of a combination of both, just because sometimes you need to be prescriptive to express the things you want to get out of your work, right? So sometimes I get a little frustrated with that. And so I'm always continuing to work on, different skills to get me where I want to go. But my nature is literally to be in the middle of something. If I start something prescriptive, like I'm printmaking, or I'm doing this or that, I'm going to try something out of the box. I just can't help myself. So definitely process is definitely my orientation. So, and I could speak to the meditation later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can maybe second that since Leslie mentioned the material focus. Of course, my material is my main focus. And one thing I'm really inspired by are the, offcuts when I'm working on a project. Say I'm cutting a large blank of corrugated cardboard on a bandsaw. I'm often inspired by things that come the sort of waste, if you will, of what I was originally going for. And with the corrugated cardboard, I'm just blown away by the patterning and the textures. And I'm always inspired to incorporate that into the next piece. So I'm also inspired by the idea as well. So it goes back and forth for me, but it is really being aware of what you're doing and everything around you, and just noticing things and being inspired by those little things that you might overlook if you're really not paying attention.
Thank you.
I'll speak. I guess for me is kind of the opposite. I start with the idea, and the idea is always comes to me as like a vision. I kind of fully visualize what is it that I want to make. And then I start making it. And sometimes I can make something out of different materials just to see like what will solve the issue or what would get closer to the idea that I visualized in my head. Like what could get me there? So I'll try different things. I did include this work in my slideshow because this, was sculptural, but some of my photographs that I embroider on, I started with printing it on canvas and then sewing them through a sewing machine, and then doing several different material combinations, and finally ending on sewing it by hand printed on cotton. So I feel like for me, it's like I have this idea and I have to figure out how to get that out into a product that comes close to the idea that I first had, which is, for me is great, because one of the things that for me that I like to do is that I like to try all kinds of different materials. I feel like any kind of art that exists, I feel like I can try to do that. I can get into that. So that's how it works for me.
Thank you.
I feel like I would be led by my ideas as well. Everything gets made in the computer first. So I kind of start with a virtual model, an image that then I'm working in the physical world to try to make like the idea I've already had. So there's room for exploration in those materials when I start working with them, but there's always something an idea that has come first.
Wonderful. Thank you for your answers. Today we have many current William Paterson students with us in the audience, as well as their faculty. Professor Nobler, I think, is here, as well as Professor Nagel. And so I thought it would be especially interesting for the students, the current students, to hear a little bit about the experiences that you had as a student. So I wanted to know if there was something you wanted to share about your experience as a student at William Paterson, and what kind of impact it had on your practice or your career. It doesn't have to be an experience inside the classroom necessarily, because I know artistic inspiration comes in many different places. But if you have anything to share, that would be wonderful. Yes, Jason.
You can go. I actually have 3 of them I was thinking about. Okay, so one of them was showing my work at a local art center in Clifton, where actually Elaine had a public sculpture out there. But I received first place for that green chair that I showed. And that really helped me gain the confidence that I needed to exhibit my work and put it outside of the university, but put it out in the world. And so that was really important to me. Another one was Elaine, and I keep bringing it back to Elaine a little bit here. She introduced us to what residencies were. And I was never clued into residencies or workshops, and I thought that was really amazing to understand that as an undergraduate student. The biggest thing, though, for me, I think, was Gary Schubert, who was an old ceramic faculty, asked me one time when I was still in my young hippie phase. I was playing hacky sack in between drawing classes, the long 5-hour drawing class. And he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Jay, when are you going to start taking things serious?" And I took that as he saw something in me that I wasn't seeing, like my potential. And as soon as he said that, it was like a light bulb went off, and I started to mature as from like that younger person to my whatever the next level is. So.
I could share some things, a few little things as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. We're listening, Leslie. Thank you.
I wasn't muted again. I keep muting because of my pets. So now just a few things that a couple of professors had said to me. I mean, I kind of started working with Elaine more when I was finished with my MFA. So she has really taught me a lot about materials as well, because I've always wanted to do more 3D work, and she's really helped me with that. There are a couple of things during school that professors said to me that just really lended themselves to my way of working, which Jason spoke about as well. And I remember in a painting class, actually, Professor Charles Magistro saying to me, "Nothing is precious. Remember, nothing is precious." And I actually didn't take painting. I should have actually taken undergraduate painting with him, because I wasn't really ready for the graduate level at the time. So I kept sneaking into his undergraduate classes because he was so great with them. But that saying nothing is precious just has really given me the freedom to let go. If I'm working on something, and I might, especially with painting or ceramics, actually almost anything, every time you work on it, it looks different, right? So 1 second you like it, 1 second you hate it, and that keeps going back and forth. And so sometimes when it's really great, but it's not finished, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to do anything to it. But that telling me that kind of gave me the freedom to just keep going. Of course you can go too far, but I don't have to keep anything as precious. I could just keep going with things. So that really influenced me. And then another professor, my thesis writing professor, Juan Robles, really, really taught me how to write and think and speak about my work a little bit better, because I'm generally very shy. But also I had never met him, and he was walking through the studio, the graduate studio, and I was painting a larger colored painting, actually was of my daughter. And he said, I had a picture there, and he said, are you painting from the picture? And I said, yes. He said, don't do that. Paint from your memory, paint from your head, or, paint from your heart, or just paint, without referring constantly to that picture. And, I was like, how come I never thought of that before? That's the way you bring out you, that's the way you put your creativity into it. So that was something I'll never forget either, him saying that. And there was, a bunch of other great things from Professor Reese and whoever, but those are things that, there's certain things that along the way, professors say to you, and if it keeps coming up for you or remembering it, there's usually a reason, there's a reason for it. So go with it.
Thank you, Leslie.
So for me, I just took one class with Elaine. But one of the things that were a stark contrast for my experience was that my graduate school in Chicago was really tough. It was grueling emotionally and physically. For many reasons, which I'm not going to go into, but it was really grueling. And the difference to me was taking the classes that I took at William Paterson, everyone was so nurturing and warm. It was really weird for me. It was like, oh, why is everybody so nice? I mean, nobody's crying. We're having a critique. What's happening here? That was something that was definitely like stuck with me. Like, the one school that I went to was really like, just trying to put you through the ringer to come to the other side as whatever you were supposed to be, instead of being nurturing. And I felt very nurtured in Elaine's class. And I felt like I learned a lot because she's a great professor. She really is. She's a great teacher. So that was my experience contrasting two schools.
Thank you, Deborah. David, would you like to share some thoughts with us?
I do, yeah. So the things that I found at Willie P were the exposure to the Visiting Artists series, which let us have lunch with and hear talks from multiple artists every semester, and get studio visits. I found that very helpful, just talking with people like colleagues, even when you weren't quite there yet, was very helpful. And then I also got to participate in a workshop through the Center for New Art, where I got to go to Italy while I was and carve stone with a robot. So that has kind of cemented my path in the digital art world. It was very informative for me.
Terrific. Yes, I remember seeing the work that was made in Italy
Yeah.
and then displayed on campus. And that was really phenomenal. So I just want to make a shout out to the other artists who are in the exhibition who are attending this program. So thank you for coming and also being here with us today. It looks like we have a couple comments and questions that I want to share with you. First is a comment from Leah Fox to Deborah. Leah says, beautiful work and presentation, Deborah. Next, we have a comment from Patricia. She has a question for Jason. She says, from making furniture then to exploring designs with cardboard, what has been your biggest surprise in working with the material and the biggest challenge?
Well, I could easily speak to the biggest challenge, and that is that it's a paper. It wants to warp, and the glue that I use has moisture in it that causes it to warp. So that's something that I have to constantly work against as I layer up the corrugations, building up a blank to then work with. but one thing that surprises me is just how strong and forgiving corrugated cardboard can be. It is very strong once you start to laminate it together, especially if you're orienting it in a proper way for the different stresses that might be put on it. But it's so forgiving in the way that if it should get damaged ever, I can easily go in there and sort of put on my doctor cap, if you will, and take some tweezers, take some bamboo skewers, and kind of mush the cardboard around and fix it so that you'll never ever see it, because the surface is so busy that I'm able to make repairs like that. So that's maybe more of a surprising thing. But normally it's the texture and the patterning that the cardboard, the corrugations present that really excite me the most with the material.
Thank you, Jason. It looks like we have a couple more questions from students, which is really wonderful. Thank you for all of you for these thoughtful questions. So Adam Raminsky has a question. How much does your environment affect the outcome and process and the initial idea of your work? This could be in terms of artwork, station, and geographically. So maybe where you're located. So I don't know if you all want to take turns answering that question, or whoever feels like that question speaks to them about how the impact of the environment on your work.
I'll take a stab at it, I guess. I mean, I think the environment's pretty important because especially, you know, most artists work from a place of, you know, no mind, you know, they just work from a place of you know, inside and stillness, whether you realize it or not. So, you know, I think the atmosphere is important. I know for me, you know, for my type of work, which is experimental and intuitive, I will not bring my computer into my studio at all. There's no electronics in my studio other than maybe listen to music. I don't want to think, I just want to make. So creating an atmosphere for yourself is very important. And then I know, for instance, in the summer when I work outside, I even paint outside, or when I go work on an easel and work outside, there's a certain sense of freedom about being outside because there's no limitations. So I think it's important to think about the best atmosphere for your type of work and your personality and what you want to produce. I don't know if that was helpful or not.
No, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to respond, or I'll move on to the next question? Oh boy, it looks like we have several questions and we're running short on time. Okay. Let's see. One of this, Anthony Adarama wants to know if you've changed your mind in doing these sculptures. I guess this was specifically a question for Jason, because you mentioned that you didn't take them seriously until the professor inspired you to make a difference. Did you run into any obstacles along the way? How have you changed your mind?
I think that's a question about when I said my work became more mature partway through my graduate studies, I believe. I think before that, it was experimental. I was trying to find myself. I was responding to a lot of my influences, you know, the artists and furniture designers that I was looking at. My work was more whimsical, more playful. And it's when I finally kind of stripped it down a little bit more and just thought about the bare elements, or the, you know, maybe it's when I put a stronger emphasis on the material and the formal qualities of those materials and what they say, what language they speak. That's when my work became more mature, and I continue that to currently in my work. It's all about the material and what it's trying to say, and I feel like that's the most honest representation of the work that I can offer. Letting the material speak, if you will.
That sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our talk. The time has gone really quickly. So we have one more question from a student that I welcome you all to respond to. And this is a question from Miguel. He wants to know, what is the biggest misconception you think people have about your work or your craft? And what have you done to overcome those misconceptions? Or did you find it better to ignore them? Oh, that's a good question. Go ahead, David.
Well, so a big misconception, I think, stems from the use of robotics in art. And I often get people saying using that type of tool kills craft and takes the humanity out of the work. And so talking to people is a way to combat that, but also I think making good work, and the use of this tool requires collaboration. So I try to talk about how it's a way that teams get put together to make work, but it just inspires a lot of conversation. But that's a big misconception about my process.
Thank you. Go ahead, Deborah.
What I wanted to say about misconceptions, and I hope this answers that student's question, is that your work will have an audience. Every work that I've made, I have made it because I'm interested and curious to explore that idea and the materials and how to bring it to life. It will have its audience. Not everybody's going to be into what you're doing. Not everybody's going to get what you're doing. They might completely disregard it or have a misconception. Your calling as an artist is to create this thing and to have it exist. So people will interact with it one way or another. They will ignore it, whatever they want to do. I just wanted to say, somebody asked about fiber art. And actually I took a little bit of fiber art in like my elementary high school years. And it was just like, it was not something that was like anything that I was thinking anything about. And one of the things that I find fascinating is how different parts of your brain are dormant. And then you come to this problem that you gave yourself and you're like, how am I going to do this? And all of a sudden that part of your brain that was sleeping, that you're like, oh, but I have the skills already. I can do this. So that's how I bring that into it. And it wasn't until many years later, I mean, graduate school, I went to undergrad and then graduate school. This is postgraduate school that I started making photographs and putting textiles together. So that's it.
Thank you for answering both those questions, Deborah. They're very helpful. Leslie or Jason, do you want to chime in there?
I think Deborah said it very well. I mean, not everyone's going to like what we do. You know, we do it as, you know, self-expression, but we're also kind of, you know, informing ourselves about ourselves, and we're all different. So, you know, we have to, you know, we know that when we show our pieces, it's not going to resonate with everyone, for sure. I remember I was thinking about what Deborah said about Chicago, because I had a friend when I was first out of undergraduate school who went to the same school in Chicago. And she was very envious of my freedom in my work. And I was very envious of her structure and how Chicago really made her have an answer for everything. And I didn't have to have an answer for anything. So, you know, we were very envious of each other in our different positions, you know, and so, you know, what comes out of these things, you know, is going to appeal to different people. And I think, you know, it's okay. It's really okay, you know, because also when you start applying to shows, you know, curators, you know, each have their own way of looking at things. And it's like school, you know, it's important to remember that they not only have their personal ideas, but it depends who else has applied to that show and how the work complements each other. So there's a lot of factors. So just keep doing what you do and be true to yourself, and don't worry about what others think, because you will gain an audience. I think Deborah said it really well.
Those are very encouraging words. Jason, we're going to wrap up soon. Do you have any parting words that you'd like to share on that topic of being true to yourself?
Well, I feel like Leslie just said it beautifully. You know, be true to yourself and just be honest with the work that you're making. And, you know, authenticity is the most important thing in the work that you make. All right. And I think I'll just leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I just have a couple parting words. I'm just going to share a final slide with everyone. Bear with me. Okay. Can you see it now? Yeah. So I want to thank David, Deborah, Leslie, and Jason so much for sharing about your practice and your heartwarming and positive growth experiences also at William Paterson, and encouragement for students, current students at William Paterson. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If you haven't already seen the Fertile Ground exhibition, I encourage you to either, you can visit in person. We have COVID protocols. It's very quiet in the gallery. And we're open Tuesday to Thursday from 11 to 5 p.m. You can also visit the exhibition virtually. I have a link to the bit.ly link to visit the exhibition. There's quite extensive information on the website, thanks to Emily and Taylor, who worked on creating the virtual exhibition. I also wanted to let you know that Professor Elaine Lorenz and I are going to be providing a virtual exhibition tour on March 25th at 2 p.m. And we have other virtual programs that we're offering this semester. In a couple weeks, we'll be hosting an artist talk by Yuji Hiratsuka on March 17th at 2 p.m. So thank you again, everyone, for being with us this evening. I'm sorry we ran over a couple minutes, but we really appreciate your presence and participation in this conversation.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.